Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get the front suspension all unbolted so we can start putting on the new stuff. Already got the shock removed. The top of the shock mount goes there, then the bottom goes down there in the control arm. Pretty easy removal on that. So now what we're going to do first is disconnect this tie rod here. You can see it's got a cotter pin and a spindle nut on the bottom of it. We'll pop that loose, and then we'll work on the bottom lower control arm and get that out, so then we can drop the spring out. A lot of people are always scared about dropping coil springs. I mean, obviously, you don't want to hurt yourself. You got to be smart about it. But if you do it the right way, it's really pretty easy. So I'll show you how we do it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is take off the cotter pin down here on the bottom of the tie rod. Just bend the tabs back and you should be able to slide it right through. Sometimes, depending on how long it's been since it's been changed, you may have to cut them off, but this one's been replaced relatively recent, so comes right out, and then we'll take off this spin or castle nut down the bottom. All right, and this is a 3/4 socket on here. Drop that down. Right. Sometimes you can just pull these off. Sometimes you need to take a hammer. This one's pretty good, so we're going to take a hammer and give it a whack or two. Alright, let's just take a heavy hammer. So this one does not want to break loose that good. There we go. Alright. Alright, so this lower castle nut is a 1 1/16. So we will get an open end on it. This one actually did not have a cotter pin on it. So the top one did. It had been removed at some time, but this one did not. So what we're gonna do is pop this loose just to get some pressure off of it. There we go. Once it breaks loose, you'll feel it. It'll go pretty easy. You can actually see it did have a cotter pin on it. It must have just rusted through. So we're going to remove this. All right, so I'm gonna try and do it from this side so you'll be able to see what happens. All right, so after repeated attempts at the lower one, it just did not want to break loose. So I went ahead and popped the top one loose and gonna drop it from there. All right, so as you can see, this one has popped, the nuts dropped down. I've now will go and put some weight on the jack to lift up the control arm. Then we can get the rest of this off. All right, so once you have the weight off of it, what I'll do is I'm gonna turn this, the rotor, we're gonna keep the brake lines attached. So by doing that, we won't have to re-bleed the brakes because we should be able to pull everything off without having to do that. Alright, so we've got it down a little bit closer, and just gonna make sure this rotor is all the way forward. I always recommend just putting something underneath it just to give you a little bit extra. Just to keep from it falling on the ground. So I'll put a jack stand there just to hold the weight of this as it comes forward. Hopefully we get it landed right. Keep going down a little bit more. And you can see these are drop springs already. So that helped us being able to get the spring out. Sometimes you've got to go all the way down with this and put a pry bar in there to get the stock spring out. But these are drop springs, so they'll come out real easy. And there you go, coil spring removal. All right, now we're gonna pull the upper control arm. You can see there's 2 bolts here. I always make a habit to try and count how many shims are on here. That'll just kind of help you get it somewhat together, and then before you take it to an alignment shop. So go ahead and we're gonna remove these 2 bolts and pull off the upper control arm. All right, so now we're going to remove these 2. They are 3/4 nuts. That control arm off. So now you can leave these on, but we're going to clean up. So what I'm going to do is just pull these shims, and there's a lot of them, so I'm actually going to bag and tag. All right, so now that we got the upper removed, we're going to go ahead and pull off the caliper. Again, we're just gonna kind of tie it up so that way we don't have to bleed the brakes. We may end up having to. This line looks pretty dry rot, so we may just go ahead and do that, but we'll see. All right, so the caliper bolts are Allen head. This is a 3/8. So you can see this line, really dry rot. So it just broke the outer rubber on it. So we're gonna go ahead and replace that line and have to bleed the brakes. Like I said, sometimes you can do it without it, but this line's really dry rot. So we'll just put this up here for now. And then take off the lower control arm. Alright, so to drop the lower control arm, you've got two U-bolts. One here and one here. The nuts are up in this channel here, so you'll need to get in and drop those out. Not the easiest to reach, but it can be done with some creative persuasion. Alright, so now we're just gonna pull this front bolt and the control arm will drop down. And there we go. The control arm, spindle, and rotor still attached. We'll pull that out. We are going to reuse these rotors, and I believe the spindles. So we'll just have to disconnect the lower ball joint, and that's going to be easier to do off of the truck than on, because that one was on there pretty good. So we'll take it out in the yard and whack the you-know-what out of it. But now I'll just do some cleaning up with this stuff and start putting the new lower control arms and upper control arms on. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and start putting on the control arms. You can see I went and I took some welding wire and just tied up the caliper out of the way. Again, we're going to have to redo this line because it's dry rotted, but I'm going to show you guys how to do it if you don't want to go through the hassle of bleeding your brakes, because I hate bleeding brakes, especially by yourself. So I'll have to have Tyler come over and help with that when we get to that point. So these are the CPP tubular control arms. They come pre-assembled with the ball joint, bump stop already installed, cross shafts. It does have a little cotter pin here that they tie to the cross shaft for you. So we'll go ahead and pull that off. You will reuse your stock nuts on here, so you can either reuse them or just go and put on some new ones if you have some new ones. Totally your choice what you want to do there. Alright, so with the CPP control arms, best thing to remember is this straight side. So you can see there's a bent one and a straight one. The straight one goes towards the front of the vehicle. So we're gonna put this over here. Now this is where, if you saved your shims, it can help you make your life a lot easier, just to get it somewhat aligned before you take it there. So I'm gonna go and put these on. Again, you're gonna have to get it aligned, but this will at least put you somewhere in the ballpark. I'd recommend obviously having them give you all new shims too, because these are a little crusty, and I pulled about an inch thick worth of dirt out of this top pocket. So you'll want to spend the time to clean all that up. So we will stack those on there, and then do the other side. This definitely had a lot of shims on it. Then we will put the control arm up, get it in. We'll grab our bolts. And we're just going to do finger tight right now. Till we get everything semi-bolted up. Alright guys, so the next thing we've got to do is drill holes for the upper bag bracket. You can see this is obviously where the coil spring pocket is. The CPP kit gives you this back bracket. You can see there's really only one way for it to go in. It goes up and like that. So what we're going to do is use some C-clamps to hold it up there, mark the holes, and then drill them out. Alright, so now you can see I've got some vice grips and some C-clamps holding up the upper bag bracket. This little indent here goes towards the back. Pretty easy to figure out. If you look at the control arms, the airbag is actually further back on the control arm. But what we'll do now is we have a total of 4 bolt holes we need to drill out. 2 here, 1 in the back corner, and 1 over there in the front corner. So we're going to go ahead and get those drilled out, and then they provide you with the nuts and bolts. So we will then bolt this in just temporarily, just to make sure everything lines up and fits. Eventually what you'll do is when you're installing this, this will attach to the airbag. Put the airbag up in it and then bolt it down, because if not, you're not going to be able to tighten the bag from the top with your bolts coming down. Also, we'll have to use our fitting and run the airline up through the coil spring pocket. So we'll go ahead and start drilling on it. Alright guys, so here's what it looks like with the upper plate bolted in, the bag bolted to the upper plate. Just did this for a test fit. Again, you're going to want to bolt the bag to the lower control arm, raise it up that way, and then bolt in the top bolts once you're putting everything in. So you can see we've got the shock support in. Again, you'll have to unbolt that just to put the shock up here on the shock stud. But it gives a good support coming against the frame. Make sure that there's not as much pressure here, because these C10s are notorious for cracking right where this bulge out is on the shock stud. So now we're gonna put everything together on the front end just for mock-up, see how everything fits. Alright, so don't mind the noise of the rain. It's we got a tropical storm going on here. These are the new U-bolts that you can get. Part number 13503. They're Dorman. They are a little bit bigger than the factory ones, However, sometimes you got to drill out your holes, but with these we don't. They actually fit good, and these are a lot stronger than the factory ones. So good thing is I already test fit these. They fit. We don't have to widen the holes where they were. So we're good to go to get the lower control arm installed. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the bag that's already bolted into the upper bag bracket. Again, I don't have the air fitting in here because it's just for mock-up. And we're going to bolt it to the lower control arm. You'll see there's a couple different slots in here, but we're going to go with the middle slot for the bag. The CPP kit does not come with bag hardware, so you will need to grab that if you don't have it already. So again, we're just going to get this one finger tight. That way we can adjust the upper bag mount. But you'll come up with basically that there. Again, you'll see this needs to be adjusted, so we're just finger tightening it so we can move this bracket however we need to line up with the holes that we put in the upper. So now we'll take the U-bolts, put the new U-bolts up in there, and tighten them down. Alright, so we'll take off. Don't forget to take off your cotter pin here. U-bolt goes up, cross shaft just like that, and up into the holes. All right. So again, just finger tight. Then we'll pull this up. And you can see why you have to keep or get the bag on first, because this comes up. You'll then line these holes up, which this upper would stay up there. Alright, so got the one bolt up. We'll just run this down. Once you get one on, it'll give you enough to hold the control arm up. Alright, so there we go. So again, this is just mocked up in here. Check our clearances of the bag, make sure everything's good, lined up. I'm gonna obviously bolt down the control arm more, but now we'll go and test out our spindle, make sure our spindle fits on good, and then test on the wheel. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, loosen up these castle nuts. This is just a plastic protector for the ball joint. Tyler hit a shot of chassis black paint on the spindles. So we'll just drop this one over the lower control arm. Again, we're not going all the way tight, just finger tight to mock up. So we got that on, pull up the upper. The upper in. Again, doesn't have to be perfectly tight since we're just doing mock-up. Then tie rod like a glove. And we took the wheels off straight. And you can see it's pretty much dead on straight. We're gonna put new tie rods on, obviously. The new steering box is gonna go up in here, but we'll do that at a later time. So now I'm going to pull the rotor off of the old setup that we had because his rotors and brakes were still good. Put that on and test fit a wheel. All right, so we got the rotor off, the old one. Bearings are still good. We are going to just temporarily put on spindle nut. That's about as far as we're going to go with it. But we'll get a new one of those and put that on. But now we'll get the wheel put on and do a mock-up and see what it's going to look like. All right, so now you can see we've got the bag in there, the control arms bolted in. Again, everything's just loosely test fitted. Not too much stretch on the bag, which is good. So now we'll jack up the lower control arm and check and make sure everything fits good there. All right, so with the bag fully compressed, inner fender wells are still in, which is holding up a little bit. But you can see that's what a 22 looks like with the bolt-in air ride. These tires that he has on here are 265 40 22s. But all in all, it'll look real good. Just about tucking wheel. It's kind of hard to tell right now. But once we get those inner fenders out, it'll probably be right at tucking wheel. So, should look really good when it's done. But that's how you do the front end. Obviously, we're going to go and tighten everything back up once we make sure everything fits. Knock out the other side, and then start on the back. So we'll do another part of the video for the rear end. That's a little bit more intensive than the front, but because you got to remove the cross members and everything. But we'll start working on that here this week. Thanks for watching. All right, so that's what it looks like, what would be laid out. It is sitting on the inner fenders, like I said, so probably get another ½ inch to an inch out of it, which should put the wheel well right down about where the rim is. But now we're gonna go bolt everything up, tighten it all down, finish up the other side, then start working on the rear. We should have that done in a different video. We're gonna do the front and then the back. The back's obviously a lot more labor intensive. You gotta cut out some of the cross members, do the bolt-in C-notch. So stay tuned for that one. But if you liked the video, go ahead, give us a like, subscribe, and click the bell notification. And you'll continue to get the updates as we're working on Project Blue Collar. Thanks for watching.